Okay, let's go ahead and turn the mouse over to Suzanne and the crew here so that they can officially begin the meeting. Zach. Thank you. Bye.
Recording.
We get Tesla's right today. You have your recorder going, Suzanne? That's also recording.
That's in the place.
Gotta call this meeting to order.
It's ringtone.
So we're going to call this meeting to order, the meeting of GACRA on May 28th, 2020 at 4:07 p.m. If you want to take roll call, Suzanne, I will mute myself till this is under control.
Okay, Mrs. Calderwood,
Here.
Mr. Carter, Mr. Conrad,
Here.
Mr. Diedenbach,
Present.
Ms. Horvath,
Here.
Dr. Norton, Mr. Page,
Here.
Mr. Thomas,
Here.
Mr. Wright.
Here.
I thought I saw him. Mr. Wright.
He's here.
We have a quorum.
Excellent. Jean, if I could so kindly call on you to please say the invocation for us today, that would be great.
Wonderful. I would be honored. Thank you. Heavenly Father, we humbly ask you to guide us today as we make the decisions that we need to make. We ask you for your wisdom and your guidance during these difficult times. We also thank you for taking care of our airport family, for keeping them safe, and also guiding them through the difficult times. We ask that you relieve the grief and sorrow from those that have suffered during this pandemic. And we also know that this cloud of darkness will be moved away. And we know through our faith that the sun will come through and will bring us to a brighter day. In the name of your Son, we offer this prayer. Amen.
Jean, thank you very much. Everybody, if we can say the Pledge of Allegiance, and I believe to make it official, you can see the American flag behind Alan. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America,
And to the republic
Stands one nation, under God, indivisible,
with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much. Suzanne, you have determined that we do have a quorum. Before we jump into this agenda, just a quick note to the fact that we are all here on the WebEx meeting. So we do have some items to vote on. If you make a motion or make the second, will you please say your name? And also, if you can feel free, if you want to ask a question, if others are talking, you can put into the chat box that you would like to ask a question so I can see you and call on you. Thank you so much. So we received the meeting highlights. Thank you very much, Suzanne, from the April 23rd meeting. We need a motion and a second on those.
Moves approval.
Craig Carter seconds.
Thank you. Is there any discussion on those meeting highlights? All right. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Is there anyone opposed? Anyone abstains? Okay, let the minutes show that the meeting highlights of April 23rd are approved. Citizens input, any non-agenda items, all you citizens out there. Okay, I guess they skipped the meeting today. We can move on. Airport Authority input, are there any non-agenda items from anybody? Okay, hearing none, we'll go on to the adoption of the agenda. If I can get a motion.
So moved, Craig Carter.
Thank you.
Secretary Diedenbach.
Excellent. Thank you, Mr. Carter and Mr. Diedenbach. Are there any discussion on the adoption of the agenda? Okay, then hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. We have an agenda. We do have a consent agenda on here that we're going to need to go over. Alan, if you would like to please go over that.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair, and good afternoon. Is just a. Am I on? Okay. Yeah, good afternoon, Madam Chair. This item is for a waiver regarding our primary rights as a lien holder for Life South Airplane, which is in our Eclipse hangar. So the bank asked us to sign an agreement that would have them as the primary lien holder for the airplane. We do charge them rent, but we don't expect any issues. It's not a lot of money. It's $2,500. I think we're around $2,000 a month. I'm sorry for that airplane. So, so in order to help them out and to get the financing that they needed, we did go ahead and suggest that you go ahead and sign that waiver of lien agreement. So.
Okay, so we
For anyone else, but for Life South, we didn't see any real issue with it.
okay. So we need a motion on this one.
So moved. Kennan here.
Second by Bob Page.
Second.
Was that second by Bob Page?
Yes, ma'am.
Excellent, thank you. All right, is there any discussion on this item for the landlord's waiver? Okay, hearing none, let's go ahead and take a vote. All those in favor of the consent agenda for the landlord's waiver?
Aye.
Is there anyone opposed to that? Anyone abstaining? Okay, consent agenda, landlord's waiver in favor of BBVA passes. Moving on to airport business, I'll turn that over to you, Alan.
All right, thank you. First thing, we'll go over just some of the things that are going on with the COVID-19 again, if you don't mind. Again, we don't really have any issues here. No employees have been ill, and no one has tested positive for COVID-19. Checking with our airlines and TSA, they don't have any other issues there, at least in Gainesville. There are a couple of TSA cases within the region, but not at Gainesville. So we're in good shape. Employees that have been working at home are beginning to come back to the office, and we're transitioning them back. So the majority of their time is spent now here back in the office. We are continuing enhanced efforts to maintain a safe and a healthy facility. We're doing this to inspire the confidence of our passengers as they begin to come back, and we're working in concert with American and Delta Airlines too on their procedures, so that we're all sort of in unison on this. Efforts have been made to create physical barriers at ticket counters and checkpoints. We'll show you some photographs of some things we're doing. We're promoting social distancing within the terminal with PA system announcements and signage, and also communicating these efforts on our website. Both American and Delta now require face coverings for all their passengers while on an aircraft and while at ticketing and gate counters. The airlines are providing a mask if a passenger does not have one. And they are also again, increasing their cleaning processes and making them more publicly well known so that passengers feel comfortable coming back onto the airplanes. Right now, use of masks by TSA personnel is still voluntary, and we're not really sure when that will change. It's probably a union issue with them. Obviously, if someone physically can't wear a face covering, they're not being required to do so. We are operating again, still a greatly reduced flight schedule. Airline passenger loads have been increasing. Delta has 2 round trips to Atlanta, American 1 round trip to Dallas, and 2 to Charlotte. There are no Miami flights. Weekend flights are also reduced. American is going to improve its schedule in July. July the 7th, they're going to add back a Miami flight, so that's great news for us. There'll be 2 flights, one at 7:45 in the morning and a 2:45 p.m. departure. We have hopes that Miami will return in August. That's going to be dependent a lot upon what UF does, and I know that they are working on plans to try and get students back in the fall. In general, our business has gone from about 5% at the bottom to about 16% today. So we have been seeing things going up steadily. TSA screenings are at the low point. We're about 53 per day 7 weeks ago. And last week we averaged about 148 TSA screenings a day. That's still pretty bad, but it's certainly going in the right direction. Nationally, we're tracking about the same. TSA has 86% fewer passenger screenings than they did the same period a year ago. That's about 341,000 versus 2.5 million. So actually, we're doing a hair better than the TSA national average. Our parking lot has averaged about 150 cars per day this week in inventory. We would really expect to see overflowing this month and have 900 to 950 cars at least in the lot based on last year's numbers. So, but that's a lot better than the 50 or so cars that we had 7 weeks ago. I also have on the agenda today something we reported on last week and asked you to think about. I don't think there were any issues there, but it is going to be an item in the agenda. We've been continuing conversations with our airlines on rent reductions, minimum annual guarantee reductions for our rental cars and our concessionaires. They are certainly trying to cling to life right now. Business is going up, but it's nowhere near break even. The CARES grant amount that we got was $3,113,693. That paperwork is down at the city awaiting the mayor's signature. We're coordinating with them. We just found out that the grant got down there. It's all electronic signature now. It's a new process for them. So it's been a little bit haphazard because it went to everybody's junk mail, unfortunately. But it did come out on May 22nd, and we're chasing it down. It may have to go on the city's agenda, and that's going to give us a little bit of a delay. But we have until June the 26th to fully execute that agreement and get it back to the FAA electronically. Along with the grant application, as I said in the last meeting, I did send a rather pointed letter to the FAA regarding our disappointment with the way that the CARES grants were handled, the formulas that were used, the lack of the ability for airports, 175 of us, to update our financials so that they had good data to work with. We have, really pulled out the stops on this. We've contacted those 175 airports. We've asked them to contact their legislators, which many of them have. And so there is a lot of effort now, if there is a CARES 2 funding package, to make sure that the Congress looks at making airports like ours whole before they start giving money to airports that really don't need the money. Frankly, there are many, many airports that got obscene amounts of money. I guess when the government gives away $3 trillion, you can't expect them to really have good accounting of it, but that's what's happened here. So that's, we're working that through. In terms of our employment, other than the 2 parking people that we furloughed because of the lack of need for assistance in the parking lot and reducing some of our curb security, we still have our full staff. And as I get into the information items, we're still using our temp workers. We're really trying to get a lot of maintenance work that is difficult to accomplish with the number of flights that we have, getting that done now that things are slow. So if I may, I'll have Suzanne spool up our little photo display here as I go through the rest of the information item. Any questions on the COVID-19 stuff before we move on? Okay. All right, so so you can all see the screen, and we'll start thumbing through here really quickly. Don't want to bore you. Are we good to go? All right. As you go through the through the terminal here, we do have a little checkpoint set up for people arriving from at-risk locations. They're still required to self-quarantine and to register when they come in. Very few of them do. It's voluntary. At some of the larger airports, there's still National Guard people and airline or people that help shepherd them. These forms are often filled out on the aircraft, but get dropped off here. And what forms we do get, we send over to the county health department. We have put up, our maintenance staff made these plexiglass polycarbonate sneeze guards, which we've installed at all of the airline and gate counters. There's a gate counter location. There are actually little markers on the floor. You've seen these at all the restaurants where people should stand offset from the computers so they can still have a conversation. We have put signs on half of our seats. Every other seat is closed right now for social distancing. We made these in-house, so they're not expensive or anything, but they do the job when people don't sit on them and swash them. You can see where they're at here. We're adding sanitizing stations throughout the terminal and re-signing them. And we're having a lot of trouble getting additional hand sanitizers. We have since this thing started. We have a number of them on order, but we've gotten some up and around. And Delta Airlines is also getting some for their folks. We're trying to get a piece of equipment here that's beeping out of our hair here. If you'll hold on just a second. Aaron, scroll. Thank you. Okay, this is the terminal construction. You can see the block wall going up at the back of the building from the ramp side. This is the back side of part of the building. This is the upper level with the two gates. It's elevated about 4 feet above the existing ground elevation. You can see the workers, the concrete form or stem wall has been poured for the ramp, and block wall is going up. And you can see where the building, all of this is going to attach to the existing building. There again is a look from the existing building. All of that will eventually be finished floor here in the next couple of weeks as the rest of the foundation's constructed. So you see the lower gate 3 seating area where the excavator is, and then you can see where the ramp is going to go up to the rest of the floor. And again, that's the connection to the building from the new to the old that's being worked on. We're trying to combine phases here because of the lower flight load to make this project go faster than it would normally have gone. So we're redoing our safety and phasing plan and doing some things differently to get the contractor in and do some of this foundation work in advance of where they normally would be. And again, this is from the apron side, and you can see the ramp where it comes up and the finished floor for the other two gates. And this is from the west elevation looking back toward the existing building. This is up on the finished floor. This would be where Delta's new gate number 1 will be. You can see the curved floor to the left, and to the right would be the restrooms in the far corner. The other rooms that we have, mechanical rooms, mother's lactation room, child's play area, the concession, will all be along that back wall. Hard to tell scale from these, but that's the corner where the child's play area would be and some additional comfy seating. Yeah. And here's just another view from the back corner of the child's play area. We'll get through these a little quicker. This is the upper floor looking back toward the building where the ramp is, just back toward the east. And as you come up the ramp at the top, this is what you would see. Okay, and that's it on the terminal. Any questions there? We're pretty much, on schedule, ahead of schedule. The roof is also being worked on concurrently with this, and we are about to re-roof the front canopy, finish that up and above bag claim. There are some issues with the elevations of the roof, the amount of insulation and lightweight concrete that was below the roof. So we're going to do things a little differently. We're looking at a change to the spec I don't think it'll have much of a budget impact. It may even be a positive impact, but you know, there were some unforeseen conditions there. We'll keep you posted on that, but I'm not worried about anything at this point, but the roof is going ahead. Our general aviation hangar project is moving right along. The joint aviation unit hangar that you see here is complete, painted inside and out. You know, all of the corrosion attended to, some steel panels were replaced, and the building looks night and day compared to where it was. I don't have the before photos. I wish I did here, but at some point we can send those around to you next. This is the inside of the hangar. Everything has been treated and painted, cleaned and painted, new LED lighting, new insulated steel roof, and they're all snug in their new facilities and are very happy about it. They liked it so much that the sheriff's people came, the pilots and the mechanic, and painted the floor. We made a clean spot for them, so that wasn't in the contract. They did that themselves, which was nice. This is the modular building that was set for them. We replaced the old trailer that was moldy, and so this is a nice modular building, hardy board on the outside. Next. Another view from the back of the hangar. Next. All the hangars are getting new electric services, so there's the new main panel. Next. And there's the new electric service. This was a little bit of a challenge. GRU threw some curveballs at us at the end. They wanted a lot more disconnects than what we would have required. It wasn't actually GRU, more the city inspector, I believe, on that one. But so there was a change order there, and they wanted everything separated differently than what the engineer had put in the approved drawings. But we went ahead and made the change. And it's just the back. We weren't getting a good catch of grass with all the dry weather, but things should start taking off, and we'll reseed that if we need to. We still do want to do a little cleanup, put another little sidewalk in for them, and a canopy between the two buildings that we took out still needs to be replaced. But they're in it, they're happy, and we'll get the little things finished off. And that's the front of the building. All right, thanks. Next.
Right, yeah, on-
Yep.
that's-
This is the Air Methods building. I'll try and get through this one a little quicker. That's the outside. It's all been painted again. New downspouts. The Joint Aviation Unit also had new downspouts and site work to get the water away from the building and regrading. We repaved the parking lot and striped it, and we're looking at doing a little bit of landscaping in-house to make that a little better. New canopies over the doors. Next. There's a corner view. It's still an old building, but it looks worlds better than it did. Inside, a new insulated roof. They're happy because it's a lot cooler in there. New LED lighting. Everything's bright and clean. And then a new electric service for them as well. Next. Right now, the contractor's on the World War II hangar. That one built in 1941, I believe, 41 or 42. Still going strong. We did replace some of the exterior panels. They're working on those doors, big steel doors on the outside. We welded some steel and replaced some corroded sections on the bottom. And the contractor is now scraping all those and some of the steel panels around. We didn't want to go too far on this thing. We could have gone a lot further, but we wanted it to be able to pay the rent. So inside, I don't know if you remember what it looked like. It was all dirty, rusty, galvanized gray metal, and it's all been treated and repainted. New LED lights were put in. Should be a lot more efficient. And then a new electric service for that one as well. The roof was patched and a new coating system applied on the roof as well. And so we're getting pretty close to the end of that one. I'm sure Debbie and UAC will be very happy about that. Any questions on the hangars? We're right now starting on T Hangar A. We've gotten all those tenants out at various locations around the airport. And they are right now working on the steel beams inside there, getting them all prepped for painting. All of these buildings will all get similar treatments. Okay, this is a project that since the number of aircraft operations on the main runway has gone down to a trickle compared to what it was, we have been able to get in with our maintenance crew and our contract laborers to make some real improvements on some grading, drainage, and safety area grading around the runway. It's something we've wanted to do for a while. We were going to have to do this work at night. We'd gotten a quote of $200,000 to do the work. And so now with just the way things worked out, we're able to do it in-house. So Suzanne, that was the approach end of runway 29er on the east side of the runway. This is the Mauser Road, which is the light lane for the approach light system. So we're kind of smoothing out all those transitions and improving the grading and drainage. This is looking off to the north from there, so there's quite a bit of area involved. We're using our own Army surplus dump truck. We've done hundreds of loads of dirt at this point. So this is one area on the south side of the road where we've graded it and seeded it. It was really dry, but the grass is starting to take off now. And another view from the east end of the Mauser light lane. Here you can see our old dump truck and our skid steer and Aaron on that. He's a real artist with the skid steer, so it's worked out really well. And that's pretty much it on what's going on with our projects. As you know, many of the other projects are on hold, as we discussed, because of the current financial and economic situation. If you look in your board packet, I won't bore you too much with statistics. They're really not all that meaningful right now, but you can see on page 21, well, I suppose go to page 25 with the 5-year rolling average, and you can see where we've nosedived. Nothing really novel about that. You all know that. If you look on page 26, you can see just in terms of load factors, where we were at 5% before, we have gone up to around 12 to 13%. So that's definitely headed in the right direction. Not much difference between American and Delta in that regard. You know, we've got some flights as much as 13.5%. Looking at page 27, our daily parking lot count, we already looked at that, but just graphically you can see where we're at, and we're starting to make a bend up. And then on page 28 is TSA screenings. Look at the orange bars, and we are, going in the right direction. Don't know how fast and how far at this point. My big concern is that, the toughest thing with a regional airport or a non-hub airport is to make sure that you have good frequency of flights and good connections. And sometimes it becomes a cart, horse, chicken, and an egg situation where you start to get a certain amount of passengers back. They're okay with the level of service, or they get a disappointing result on the level of service in terms of their connections. And if a flight gets canceled, and then they make the decision, okay, I'm not going to do this next time till things get better. And it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. So we have to convince the airlines to make the investment in additional flights to get that frequency back, so that those folks will look at those schedules and say, yeah, that works for me. And they're hesitant to add capacity because they don't want to continue to bleed money, but they're going to continue to bleed money unless they add capacity. Now, they're smart people. The fact that they're adding Dallas back in July is a really good sign that they don't expect this thing to last, that we are a solid market, would be my, read of that. And that, they will make the investment at the proper time. Delta has been a lot more cautious than American. You might have read some Forbes articles lately about American. American is seen as the weakest of the three, and there are some that are convinced that they will be the one to go bankrupt in a few months. That would be really bad news, but you have to be prepared for that. I think we all do in this business. I have seen every major airline in my career go bankrupt at one time or another. We thought we were out of the woods on that, but it's a tough business. So we'll see, what happens. We're obviously going to look at our accounts receivable and do whatever we can to try and limit that when it comes. Any other questions on the information items?
No.
Okay. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Am I? Oh, I am not muted. I am. Oh, great pictures, by the way. Excited to come out there and see it. So moving on, Matt must be on here because we're going to move on to the finance report.
I am.
Hi, Matt. Good to see you.
You ready?
We're ready.
Okay, so if you turn to the middle of page 32, I'll summarize the month. Total revenues for the month were $1,000,006. And that's basically because we had two extraordinary items in the month from the land sales and the building sale. And those two came up to about $616,000. So if you remove that from the $1,000,006, we had about $389,000 of regular operating revenue as opposed to $571. That put us $182,000 under budget in revenue for the month. And that mainly comes from the parking revenue and a little bit from the rental cars. Total expenses for the month were $398,000 as opposed to $452,000 budgeted. And that's about $54,000 under budget for the month. Net revenue with those two extraordinary items were $593,000, and the budget amount would be $103,000 for the month, and that would be $489,000 over budget for the month. Without those two extraordinary items, we would take a loss of $23,000 for the month and would be $127,000 under budget for the month. Year to date, with those two extraordinary items in there, we're about $1,581,000, and that would make us about almost $800,000 ahead of budget for the month. Without those two extraordinary items, it would be $964,000 year to date, and we would still be $181,000 ahead of budget for the month.
I move to accept the treasurer's report.
Craig Carter, second.
Any discussion on the treasurer's report?
Well, I correct myself. It's the finance report.
Okay. So the finance report. Any discussion on the finance report? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Is anyone abstaining? Okay, the motion carries. The finance report is passed, is approved. Alan, I'm going to hand back this to you for a resolution on some rental relief for our airlines and rental cars and commissions.
All right, thank you. Before I get to that, I do want to make a clarification. I may have misspoke in my long diatribe previously, but I wanted to make sure I may have said that Miami was starting up in July, and did not mean to say that. Yeah, it's Dallas, Fort Worth, and Miami potentially in August. Okay. All right, on page 34 is item number 3, and this is the single resolution giving the flexibility to reduce rents, to go ahead and do these things that are outlined in the resolution. One was to reduce the terminal exclusive and non-exclusive rent for our two airlines by up to 25% beginning April 1, and allowing that to occur until the end of the calendar year, December 31st. We would look at that in 90 days and look where we are and speak with our airlines, see how things are going for them financially and for us. And then look again at the end of the fiscal year to make decisions through the rest of the year. This was something that was asked of by our airlines in various iterations, and we wanted to be consistent with all of our tenants and how we would approach this. I do want to preface again and remember that the CARES grant, the $3.1 million, was supposed to assist us in making those kinds of concessions and for our own revenues that we were losing, due to the COVID-19 virus. So we certainly have been encouraged in a call with the FAA Associate Administrator to work with our tenants. The idea here is to keep employment, keep the airports intact, keep the tenants intact, and get through this thing together. So it's not a requirement. We actually, in the grant, we can use the money for any legal purpose. Unfortunately, you got a lot of airports out there that got a bonanza that are going to be using it for gold-plated pilots' lounges or things. I don't know what they're going to do. But, so anyway, it's a 25% reduction for the airlines. It doesn't affect boarding bridge rents. It doesn't affect landing fees. Those are weight-based and enplanement-based and a flat fee on boarding bridges. The airlines don't have a MAG, but it is a substantial amount of rent that they share between the two of them. In Section 2, the rental cars, they go out on the limb in their contracts to give us a minimum annual guarantee. None of them would have foreseen a pandemic like this. And so they are paying us for basically business they hope to get when they sign that contract. In this case, business is a fraction compared to what it was. So we would look to abate the minimum annual guarantee, the monthly allotment for that for the months of April, May, and June. We would have the flexibility to reduce their terminal rent by up to 25%. Again, to look at that in 90 days and at the end of the fiscal year and at the end of the year. That's a very minor portion of what they pay us, the actual terminal rent. The business would still be subject to the 10% concession fee on gross revenues, so they would still pay that, but they would be relieved from the minimum guarantee for the months of April, May, and June. And you would still have the flexibility to reduce that MAG if it was determined that that was necessary at some point. But that's not what we're suggesting here. Okay, it's abatement of the bag for 3 months. The charges for their use of the rental car quick turn facility would be unchanged. They would still pay from their CFC, which has about $1.3 million in balance in it, for the upkeep of that facility, the rent on that facility, and they would still pay for their gas in cash. And they're the amount that we charge per wash. Any questions on rental cars? Okay. In Section 3 would be Tailwinds Deli and Gifts. That would be, again, similar to the rental cars. There would be an abatement on the minimum annual guarantee for the months of April, May, and June. But that we may reduce that, since most of what they pay is in the MAG, that we would have the ability to reduce that by 25% for the rest of the year to be evaluated periodically. Tailwinds would still be subject to their 5.5% of gross receipts for food that they pay, food and beverage, and sundry sales that they do, and 7.5% of vending machine sales that they do. So they will still pay us that for what they take in. It's a minimal amount at the current level of business. And that we always still have the ability to change the required hours of operations for the food concession in the terminal. Right now, they are operating for all departures in the sterile area. So they are providing limited sandwich and snack service and beverages in the sterile area. But the pre-security food and beverage has been closed. Talking to them, they think that it won't be too long here before we can at least get lunch hour sort of middle of the day service over there. So I'm talking with them quite often, and you know, they're getting encouraged by the way things are going. This has probably hit them harder than anybody in terms of cash flow and their financial ability to weather it, except for Hertz, and we'll get into them in a minute, unfortunately.
Oh, okay.
Grace,
Yep.
you probably can't get me, or can you?
I cannot see you or hear you on the
We
meeting.
just had a lightning strike near the airport here, and GRU power flickered off for a minute. So we're trying to reestablish. So if you can let the rest of the group know, we're trying to.
I will do it. Okay, let me know.
Thanks.
Bye. If all of you can hear me, would you please make sure that you have your chat box open? If you click on the little bubble, it'll open the chat box on the side.
Done.
Thank you. And it just occurs to me, if you could hear me say that, I could have just actually said to you that there's been a lightning strike and they're trying to get the connection back up. Oh, good. And Randy, you heard his call on the phone. Funny.
I think we all did.
Perfect. So now you've been triply notified. Is everyone working from home still?
I'm in the office.
Are you the only one in there, Randy, or have you started to bring people back?